Money became boring, and at first, that felt wrong. Because nobody grows up being told, hey, the goal is to make your financial life so stable that you stop thinking about it all the time. That doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't sound like success. It sounds like something a responsible accountant would whisper while slowly closing Excel spreadsheets at 2 a.m. But here's the thing. Boring is exactly where things start to change. Because when money stops being exciting, you stop making emotional decisions with it. And emotional decisions are where most financial mistakes live. Our stickman started noticing this shift slowly, not dramatically, no cinematic moment, no inspirational speech in the rain, just small changes. The kind you don't really notice until you look back and think, wait, I don't do that anymore. He used to check his portfolio constantly. Now he checks it occasionally. Not because he stopped caring, but because nothing meaningful changes in the short term anyway. It's like checking the weather every 2 minutes. You're not getting new information. You're just reinforcing anxiety. He used to get excited about every small market movement. Now he barely reacts. Not because he's detached from reality, but because he finally understands volatility doesn't equal progress. And then something interesting happened. He started noticing how much of his financial life was actually driven by emotion, not logic, emotion. For example, a stressful day at work used to equal a purchase. A good day at work used to equal a purchase. A boring day used to equal a purchase. At this point, life had accidentally trained him to associate money with mood regulation. Bad mood? Spend. Go. Neutral mood? Spend anyway, just in case. It's funny when you see it clearly, and a little uncomfortable. Because nobody really sits down and says, I would like my emotional state to be directly connected to my credit card balance. But that's what happens when spending becomes a habit instead of a decision. So he started experimenting, not with earning more, not with chasing some secret investment strategy, but with something far more powerful. Delay. Just a simple pause. When he felt the urge to buy something, he didn't immediately say yes. He didn't immediately say no either. He just paused, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a week, and something strange started happening. Half the things he needed stopped feeling important. It turns out urgency is often fake, manufactured, emotional, temporary. The item that felt absolutely essential on Monday somehow became meh by Thursday. And this is where a big realization began forming. Most financial decisions are not actually about money. They are about emotion management. We don't buy things because we need them. We buy things because we want to change how we feel. And that's a dangerous system, because feelings change constantly, but prices do not. So the gap between emotional impulse and financial reality becomes where wealth leaks out. Quietly, one decision at a time. Now let's talk about something even more subtle. Lifestyle inflation, the silent killer of long-term financial progress. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, hello, I am here to slowly erase your financial freedom. No, it shows up dressed as success. You get a raise, you feel good. You deserve something nicer, a slightly better apartment, a slightly nicer car, a slightly more expensive lifestyle. Nothing dramatic, everything reasonable. And that's exactly why it works. Because it never feels irresponsible. Our stickman experienced this too. A small increase in income, nothing life-changing. But suddenly, the default settings of life started adjusting. Better food, more convenience, more subscriptions, more small upgrades. And none of it felt dangerous. Individually, everything was harmless, but collectively, his financial progress slowed down without him noticing. That's the trick. Lifestyle inflation doesn't attack your income. It quietly follows it, like a shadow that grows with success. The solution wasn't extreme frugality. It wasn't deprivation. It wasn't living like a monk in a cave counting rice grains and analyzing their emotional value. It was awareness. The simple question, did my life actually improve or just become more expensive? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the upgrade is real. Better tools, better environment, better quality of life. That's good. But often, it's just noise. Because as money became more boring, something unexpected happened. Time started becoming more interesting. He began noticing something he had ignored for years. His days were not actually shaped by money, they were shaped by habits. And habits are incredibly powerful. Wake up, check phone, work, eat, scroll, spend, sleep, repeat. Most people don't lack financial knowledge. They lack behavioral awareness. They already know what they should do. Save more, spend less, invest consistently, avoid unnecessary purchases. The issue isn't knowledge, it's execution. And execution is driven by systems, not motivation. So he started changing systems, not dramatically, just gently. Automatic transfers, simplified spending, fewer decisions, less friction, more structure. And something beautiful happened. Money started leaving his attention without leaving his control. That's an important distinction, because many people think financial discipline means constant effort. But real discipline eventually becomes invisible, like brushing your teeth. You don't negotiate with yourself every morning. Should I brush today? Or maybe invest that time into gum-based hygiene optimization theory? No, you just do it, because the system is already decided. That's what financial systems aim to become: invisible but consistent. And once that happens, something surprising emerges: mental space. For the first time, he wasn't constantly thinking about money, not because he had ignored it, but because he had structured it. And that mental space changed everything. He started noticing other things again: conversations, people, ideas. Even boredom started feeling different. Before, boredom used to trigger spending. Now boredom just existed, without needing a financial response. And in that space, something subtle began to grow: perspective. He realized how much of modern life is designed to interrupt patience. Everything is optimized for speed. Fast entertainment, fast results, but wealth doesn't work that way. Wealth is slow, almost stubbornly slow, which means building it requires a different type of personality. Not the most aggressive, not the most impulsive, but the most consistent. And consistency is not exciting. It doesn't trend on social media, it doesn't get applause, it doesn't feel dramatic. It just quietly works, like gravity. You don't notice it daily, but over time, it shapes everything. Our stick man began to understand this deeply. The middle part of wealth building was not a story, it was repetition. Wake up, make a good decision, repeat. And the strange part, nothing feels like it's happening while it's happening. Only later do you realize how far you've come. And that realization is always delayed, which is why most people underestimate it. They quit too early, because the middle feels like nothing is happening. But in reality, everything is happening, just slowly and quietly. And that's where part 2 ends. Not with excitement, not with transformation, but with something far more important: stability. Because once money becomes boring enough, you finally have the space to build something that lasts. The day money became boring, part 3. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Because when money becomes boring, something else becomes exciting. Life. Not the Instagram version, not the highlight reel, not the carefully edited version where everyone somehow owns a yacht and drinks coffee while staring thoughtfully at mountains. I'm talking about actual life, the ordinary stuff, the stuff people overlook while chasing the next financial milestone. Because many people accidentally turn wealth building into another form of consumption. Instead of buying products, they're buying financial goals. First it's, I'll be happy when I save $10,000. Then, I'll be happy at $50,000. Then, $100,000. Then, $250,000. Then, $500,000. And every time they arrive somewhere, their brain moves the finish line. It's like chasing a rabbit that's secretly employed by your own mind. The rabbit always stays just far enough away to keep you running. And the strange part, most people don't even realize it's happening. Our stickman certainly didn't. One day, he was sitting in his living room, staring at a chart. Again, because apparently charts are fascinating now. The market had gone up. His investments had grown. Objectively, everything was fine. But he wasn't celebrating. He wasn't even satisfied. He was immediately focused on the next number, the next goal, the next milestone, the next target. And then he had a thought, a surprisingly uncomfortable thought. What happens if I keep doing this forever? What happens if every goal simply creates another goal? What happens if I spend my entire life preparing to live? That's when things started changing, because money was never supposed to become the destined. It was supposed to become transportation, a vehicle, a tool, a means of creating a better life, not a substitute for one. And once he understood that, he started paying attention to something he had ignored for years: time. You see, almost everyone thinks money is the scarce resource, but eventually you realize something important. Money can be earned, lost, rebuilt, replaced. Time can't. Every year that passes disappears permanently. No refunds, no exchanges, no customer support department. Trust me, I've checked. And suddenly our stick man started seeing wealth differently. Instead of asking, how much money do I have? He started asking, how much control do I have? That's a completely different question. Because real wealth isn't just measured in dollars, it's measured in options. Can you handle an emergency? Can you take time off? Can you help family if they need support? Can you walk away from a bad situation? Can you sleep peacefully? Those questions matter a lot. And ironically, they're usually answered by decisions that looked incredibly boring at the time. The emergency fund nobody noticed, the investments nobody applauded, the spending you avoided, the upgrades you skipped, the habits you repeated, the systems you built. One tiny decision after another, quietly, for years. This is why wealth often feels invisible while it's growing. Nobody notices compound interest. Nobody notices financial discipline. Nobody notices responsible budgeting. Nobody notices canceled subscriptions. Nobody notices an increased investment contribution. Nobody notices patience. But eventually they notice the outcome. And that's where things get funny. Because people love outcomes. They just hate the process that creates them. Everyone wants the tree. Nobody wants to plant the seed. Everyone wants the castle. Nobody wants to build the foundation. Everyone wants financial freedom. Nobody wants Tuesday. Ordinary Tuesdays. The kind that don't feel important. The kind that don't make exciting stories. The kind where you simply do the right thing again. That's all. No dramatic music. No breakthrough moment. No motivational speech. Just another good decision, repeated. Now let's talk about one of the biggest myths in personal finance. The myth that wealthy people spend all day thinking about money. Some certainly do, but many don't, because eventually the goal isn't maximizing every dollar. The goal is maximizing life. Imagine two versions of success. In the first version, someone has a lot of money, but constantly worries about it. They're stressed, obsessed, checking numbers every hour, unable to relax, unable to disconnect. Money controls them. In the second version, someone has enough systems in place that money largely takes care of itself. They still pay attention, they're still responsible, but they aren't consumed by it. Money supports life. Life doesn't. Which version sounds richer? Exactly. That's why one of the most underrated financial goals is reaching a point where your finances stop dominating your thoughts. Not because you're irresponsible, because you've become competent. Think about driving a car. When you first learn, every action feels complicated. Mirrors, pedals, steering, signals, everything requires concentration. Years later, much of it becomes automatic. Money works the same way. At first, everything feels confusing, then difficult, then manageable, then routine, then boring. And boring is beautiful, because boring means stability. Boring means systems. Boring means confidence. Boring means you're no longer relying on motivation. You're relying on habits. And habits are much more reliable. Motivation is like that friend who always says they'll help you move furniture. Habits are the friend who actually shows up, every single time. Now let's fast forward. Years have passed. Just older enough to notice something. Life feels different. Not because of one giant breakthrough. Not because of one lucky investment. Not because he discovered some secret strategy hidden inside an ancient mountain temple. Life feels different because thousands of tiny decisions accumulated. And that's when he realizes something. The goal was never becoming rich, at least not in the way he originally imagined. The goal was becoming free. Free from financial panic. Free from constant comparison. Free from needing approval. Free from lifestyle inflation. free from the pressure to impress people who weren't paying his bills anyway, and perhaps most importantly, free from worrying about money every single day. That's real wealth. The funny thing is that if you met him now, you might not even notice. He's not necessarily driving the most expensive car, not necessarily wearing the most expensive clothes, not necessarily showing off anything at all. Because by the time many people become financially secure, they've lost interest in looking financially secure. They don't need the signal anymore. The result is enough. And that might be the biggest lesson of all. The people most obsessed with appearing wealthy are often still chasing wealth. The people who have built genuine financial security are often focused on completely different things: family, health, time, experiences, meaningful work, relationships, peace, life. Money hasn't disappeared. It's still important. It just moved into its proper place. It's no longer the star of the show. It's part of the support crew, quietly doing its job in the background. And maybe that's what real financial success actually looks like. Not excitement, not drama, not constant stimulation, not watching charts every 15 minutes, not obsessing over every market movement, not spending every waking moment thinking about money.